Joining us to discuss the president's just announced public safety emergency declaration and his intent to beautify the city and lower crime there in D.C. is psychiatrist Dr. Carol Lieberman and law enforcement expert Michael Letts. Carol, Michael, good to have you both with us today. Let's look first at the scope of this issue. The media is widely reporting that crime is trending down in D.C., though violent crime in D.C. per capita remains higher than many other large states, and there's a notable increase in crime involvement among youth. So, Michael, to begin, from a law enforcement perspective, what's your assessment of the crime levels in D.C.?
Well, I think it's critical what you just said, and it's not just in D.C. We're seeing cases in the last few days in New York. Of course, we just saw it in Cincinnati. There seems to be becoming a trend among our young people, and the trend is a very scary issue. We had 100 young people in D.C. that kind of congregated around the dock area, refused to back down when law enforcement got there for disturbing the police. And this trend among young people is becoming trendy to attack innocent bystanders, film it, and see who can get their 15 seconds of fame on YouTube or wherever it is posted. And so if we allow that to continue, you know how young people follow among themselves. They all like to be doing the same thing. They all like to do what they think is a trendy thing to do. That's why we have to nip this in the bud right away. That's why I'm proud of the president to make sure that if they can't handle it in D.C. the way they're doing now, it's time to step up the measures and make sure that we bring this, and as old Barney Fife used to say on the Andy Griffith Show, nip it in the bud early, because we can't afford this to get out of control.
And you pointed to some potential factors there that could be funneling into this phenomenon we're observing among the youth in D.C. Turning to you, Carol, and following on from that, as a psychiatrist, what do you see as some of the key causational factors here potentially?
Well, one of the factors that the president talked about is that there has developed over time a lack of respect for the police. Like he was talking about how these criminals just spit in the face of the police. And it's really hard for them to do their job, especially because they've been told to stand down. What I also am very happy that the president is tackling is the homelessness. You know, he talked in the press conference, he was talking mostly about the crime, but in his bill, or the executive order, he put out an executive order that relates to the homelessness and problem. And the homeless problem is really comprised of there being it started when the mental hospitals, the state mental hospitals, were closed, and all these people were let out into the street, and they either filled up the jails, or they would have filled up the psychiatric hospitals if there had been any there. You know, that's a problem that we need to fix, where, first of all, we need to determine which ones, who is mentally ill, who is a criminal. There needs to be triage. And the people who are homeless, it's not enough to just give them a roof, for a month or whatever, or to put them in the hospital, in an acute hospital, for 3 days, a 72-hour hold. People who are a danger to themselves, a danger to others, or gravely disabled, meaning that they can't put a roof and clothing and food together for themselves, they need to be not incarcerated, but they need to be admitted to a mental hospital where they're going to be able to stay for a long time, not just the 72-hour hold. And that's the problem that we have. And I hope that the president is planning on tackling that, because we need to have more long-term hospitals, and they're not cuckoo's nests. I've had a lot of experience with state mental hospitals, and they are not cuckoo's nests.
And this issue is not only local to D.C. Of course, there are many cities around the country where homelessness is a real issue, and that's known. And also, psychiatric hospitals have been generally on the decline around the country and losing funding and shutting down over the past decade or longer. From a law enforcement perspective, Michael, what's it like for law enforcement to be encountering this particular aspect of the issue, where there is, potentially substance abuse, psychological problems that are long-lasting, and how do they interact with it? What challenges do they face?
Well, it's become a very scary thought, quite frankly, being involved in law enforcement, because now when you come upon a scene and you're dealing with someone who has mental conditions, you're not sure what they've been involved with. They may be on fentanyl. They may have fentanyl powder on them. You know, if fentanyl gets on you, it can easily kill you. So we're put our officers at a much greater risk than they've ever been before. And I like what the doctor said. We don't seem to have come to a realization that the mental health condition impacts the criminal element at the same time and the amount of crime that we're seeing. So we're going to have to dedicate resources to both. We're going to have to increase the number of law enforcement, increase their equipment, increase their funding. We're going to have to dedicate resources to education among our young people. You know, it's about time we teach a little bit of values and principles back in our educational system again. There's nothing wrong with telling a young person you need to respect the law. And we're going to have to put some resources into mental health as well, because they all three combined, if they don't all work together, they work out of synergy, out of sync, nothing gets accomplished.
And back on this issue of teaching the youth, particularly how to interact almost with society and addressing the issues that they are clearly facing some kind of phenomenon here. Attorney General Pam Bondi today said that U.S. AG for D.C. Jeanine Pirro would fight back against the teenage crime that they're seeing rising in D.C. So, Carol, looking specifically at teenage crime, what issues do you think will need to be addressed for this particular demographic, and what actions do you think will be most effective?
Well, you know, it starts in the home. Teenage crime, all kinds of crime, really, but, you know, eventually when they get older. But teenage crime starts in the home. It starts with the parents not teaching them respect for other people, not teaching them respect for the police. You know, there are some homes where they really purposely teach them not to respect the police, not just, you know, to be neutral, but no, these police are bad and you should really, you know, you don't have to listen to them. So, and values, not just about the police, but values in general, you know, having a sense of hope for their future. This all has to start with the parents, with the schools, with things that could be done in the neighborhoods to give the teens a sense of that they do have a future. Because really the problem is that if they don't see a good future for themselves, if they don't see themselves as being able to get a job in the future, or making their dreams come true in the future, that sense of hopelessness, you know, that's why we have suicide by cop. I mean, that's the extreme of this. If they don't really feel that there's something worth living for, then they don't care about whether they're going to, you know, they'll rob somebody or they'll spit in the face of a cop. I mean, it's like, what else is there to be or to do? You know, they don't have any hope for the future. And that's what we need to instill, not just helping parents to do that, but also in the schools. Because you can tell, teachers can tell, if they're trained enough, they'll be able to tell who, even in elementary school, which kids are going to grow up with problems with the law. How do you know? It's the kids who are sitting all alone at lunch, for example, or the kids who are bullied, or the bullies. Those are the kids who are going to have problems down the line. And if something can happen right there, and there aren't enough, you know, mental health professionals, social workers, psychologists in the schools, that needs to be addressed. But if that kind of if things can start early, before they get to be these teens who give up and who have, you know, no respect for anybody, that's the important way to do it.
So there's an element of hope here in terms of teaching them there is something to hope for and strive for, and that there is a chance they can meet their own dreams, their goals that they could set. But from the discipline side here, we heard a lot about discipline today in the press conference. And Michael, the president, today confirmed he would be bringing in more police and the National Guard. He said when you walk down the street, you'll see police and the FBI. How do you think that could impact crime and morale on the streets?
It's going to have a tremendous impact on crime, because let me tell you, if you know the criminal element, you know the criminal mindset, they always look for the easy way out. They're not interested in robbing you if they think you're going to pose a challenge. And so if they see increased defense, guard, law enforcement, they're going to find some other place to go. It'll boost the morale of the officers that we have there. And I think it will boost America's morale once they begin to see crime steadily continue to decline. But we've got to deal with the young people, because if you deal with declining crime now, but don't deal with the source of the next generation, what have you accomplished?
Now, Carol, from a psychological standpoint, what could be the effect on residents and tourists of seeing all these police and FBI agents just out there on the streets?
Well, you know, some of them are not gonna like it, but hopefully the majority of them will realize that the effect that this is going to have, the ultimate effect of making the place safer. You know, that was an important part of what the president was talking about. That his attitude of consequences, I think, will trickle down to the police and then to the criminals. Because that's been the problem all along as well, that if people don't see that there are consequences to doing these acts, then they just give in to their impulse, their immediate impulse. And whether it's because they're on drugs or just in general because they don't see why not kind of thing. But that there has to be consequences, just like with the kids at colleges. The protests that went on way too long because there were no consequences. People have to realize that there are consequences to be a citizen in this country.
Final thoughts here, Michael, as we wrap up. From a police perspective, what do you look forward to on this issue going forward?
Well, I look forward to the president continuing to providing the support necessary as we continue to recruit more officers, making sure they're properly equipped so they can come home safely to their families, and making sure we send a message that authority and that law and order have returned to this country. There are consequences. Everybody has to be held accountable for their actions. I don't care whether you're the president of the United States or you're the janitor at a local factory. Everyone, you choose an action, that's great. But whatever the consequence is, you'll be accountable for it. And that's the message we need to send today.
We're certainly seeing a lot more of that, and we'll be watching it closely. Thank you so much for your time today, Dr. Carol Lieberman, Michael Letts. Good to have you both on our show.
Thank you. God bless you. God bless America.
Michael Letts, Invest USA, supplying bulletproof vests to the people who serve us.